On.
Hello, friends and neighbors. Welcome to the studio class here at Low Brass U. A sauce typically made with ground meat, onions, tomato puree, and red wine served with pasta is the definition of a ragu. I am your co-host, Connor, and with us today is our fearless leader, Zachary.
Wow, that was not the intro that I was expecting, but maybe the intro that Gotham deserves.
There you go. I thought I'd mix it up today.
You did mix it up. If that was your goal, you achieved your goal today.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. For those keeping score at home, we're a little early today, but maybe
Early bird special.
We could segue this into how you should be early for every gig, but we won't patronize you with that. But yes, we are a little bit early today. Just some scheduling things came up, and it made it easier. So we're early, and we'll go as long as we go. I'm not really sure what time that'll be, but yes. So we've got a couple of topics that we have predetermined, but as per usual, if you have some burning low brass and/or music questions, we're happy to try to field those questions with answers as best as we can. But I thought we would talk a little bit about slide position choices. I've had a lot of lessons not this week, but this past week, that a lot of students probably felt like I was giving them a hard time about their slide position choices. And I thought it was helpful with them to kind of like come to a specific kind of list of what my objectives are with slide positions on the slide trombone. But before I give my my kind of lineup, because I've been thinking about it a lot lately, what are some of your thoughts, Connor?
I'm definitely a path of least resistance person in all aspects of my life, and the trombone is no exception. And I would say that the alternate positions that I use when I'm playing a musical passage are not because I'm very clever or because I'm trying to be tricky. It's usually because I don't want to do a whole lot of work, or at least I don't want to work any harder than I absolutely have to. And that's usually what it is for me. Every now and then there's like a voice leading concern or a harmonic thing that I might be thinking about, or a specific sound that I want. Those instances are pretty few and far between, but I did have a couple of those specific like music theory situations come up recently. I made some new trombone friends, and I've been playing trombone quartets once a week for a while up here in Washington. It's been a lot of fun. And there's a lot of times where I will be playing the fourth scale degree, the flat 7 of a 5 chord, resolving down to a third. And if it's easy enough for me, even if it's not like the main position that I might play that note in, sometimes it makes sense to go out to an alternate position. Like if you're playing an A flat 7 going to D flat major 7, you might throw that F in 6. You might regret it because it might be out of tune and it might sound bad. But sometimes, especially if it's in the middle of a moving line, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. But that's all I got on the topic.
Yeah. Let's just real quick give a shout out to Juan. Thank you for coming back. At least I've been great. I can't speak for Connor. I believe he's also been well.
Great. No complaints.
But happy that you're able to join us again. Maybe the early time is better for you. Maybe we should consider this earlier time.
Early bird special.
We don't really know what the best time or day is. We just try to fit it in every week. But anyway, yeah. So I like the voice leading idea, and I never call it that, and I'm going to start calling that. So, and I will never credit you with that. No,
please don't.
But yeah, that's my. At first, earlier last week I was calling them my slide position rules, and then I realized I hated the term rules, and I thought that was maybe a little bit misleading to how absolute these things are. So I softened it to guidelines. And so my first guideline is about that voice leading concern of keeping half steps together. That's kind of how I kind of reference it, is keeping half steps right next to each other. And I think that just helps the sound for the most part. It helps it sound more similar. Sometimes like we're talking about that 4-3 motion, like in the key of B flat on a trombone, or playing that E flat above the staff going out to 4th position D, is like the first most common one that I feel like comes up. And to me, I just like that sound better in most circumstances compared to going back to first. So sound is kind of the first stop on the train for me. Then the next thing is some logistical, physical concerns, right? We just simply cannot move from 1st to 7th that quickly. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's kind of one of my next thing, is making sure that I'm able to move the slide very easily. But it depends on the situation. Not every situation do I do that. If it's a staccato line, I might opt to, use a larger motion just to play in the position, or use the valve in the way that I'd like to. So for me, that first thing is always the half step or the voice leading motion. But then that logistical concern definitely becomes a part of it. So that's kind of my next guideline. But the second and third of my guidelines kind of conflict. And I want to use the position with the best sound. So to me, in isolation, what sounds the best is using the least amount of tubing, and then when we're comparing the valve or not the valve, using the not the valve, or the least amount of valve tubing as possible.
Okay, so less valve takes precedence, or at least tubing takes precedence.
Right, so the example is like, a C in the staff. To me, if it's just an isolation, I'm going out to 6th position every single time. If it's my next favorite spot to put it, assuming I'm playing bass trombone, is with the second valve, because that's less valve tubing and more slide tubing. And then my least favorite spot to put it is with the valve. But sometimes logistically, that's not necessarily possible. In this magical world, we could have a 16th note line that's just B flat to C, B flat to C, B flat to C, back and forth. I'm not going 1st to 6th to 1st to 6th if I have a valve on me.
No.
I don't think that makes sense. And I probably wouldn't even go 1st to 2nd valve and out a little bit. It's probably going to be 1st to 1st with the trigger, to 1st to 1st with the trigger. So there's definitely some conflict in what makes the most sense. And keeping with the idea that they're guidelines, I don't do it to the end of the earth. So, you mentioned voice leading. At what point do you give up on just keep going out there? Are you playing a lot of A flats in 7th these days?
Not a whole lot.
But theoretically, if you had, half step, half step, half step, half step, you could get out there where that's the right thing to do.
All right. Okay. So yeah, that could happen if we were like walking down by half step for a long time.
Yeah, or just a chromatic run or something.
Right, and that would be maybe like another like asterisk to that rule would be like it's to the effect of the least soupy portamento, or like I'm trying to eliminate the soupiest of portamentos in my book. And so probably for me, if I was doing half steps, going from 6th position A to 3rd position G sharp or whatever it ends up being, that's going to be probably soupier than one of the other portamentos that I could try to navigate around at some point while I was walking down this theoretical half step line that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that portamento is a good word that maybe not everyone would be aware of the meaning of that. Do you want to define portamento for the class?
portamento is a glissando that you didn't mean to do.
There you
essentially.
go. That's a good way to put it. I don't think that's what's in the Grove Music Dictionary online, but
I've never looked at the Grove Music Dictionary online.
But yeah, I think that's a really nice way of putting it. It's a glissando that you didn't mean, and that's definitely one of the other guidelines that I have in there that, just depends on the situation, and everyone's a little bit different in what they choose to do. I can't remember what piece I was playing, but one of my first trombone teachers, Dr. Brett Schuster, would always he wouldn't want to go a minor third on the same slide, I think was his rule. So thinking about going B flat to G, he wouldn't want to play first position to fourth position. He'd rather go fifth position, B flat to G, fourth position.
Like, this is just slurring? Is that? Like,
yeah, I think that's the context. Yes.
Just in general, or like moving passages. So we're
yeah.
not talking
So
about
we don't get
the ride like 6 to 5.
Well, I mean, you don't sneak a fifth position in there.
I guess you could. Well, or wait, no, I'm talking about the minor.
Okay.
That thing.
Sure.
That little section.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, probably not there, but maybe. I mean, that's the thing. Everybody has their own set of guidelines.
Everyone's got their own preference.
And, and I think another thing that's important, because I told my students that I like using alternate positions more than others. Maybe not more than everybody.
You do.
But there are people who wouldn't want me to do that. And what I would also say is I don't do it in every scenario. Mm-hmm. I know the situations where people don't want me to use those alternate slide positions. And you know what? I generally don't. A perfect example I've found in professional situations is that in orchestral playing, most everyone around me is not using alternate positions left and right. And I think that the idea there is that the sound is the most important part.
Right. That makes the most sense.
And so when I'm in that scenario to fit in with the cool kids, I tend to use more principal slide positions than I normally probably would. And I think that that's what people kind of expect of you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I personally try to end up doing. Unless it's, obviously, again, these are all guidelines. There might be a situation where it's so technically challenging that that's just not really an option for me to do. If we're thinking about, like, I don't know, maybe something like, I'm blanking on a good example. Like Gazaladra would maybe be a good example of when to use the valve. Do we ever go out in seventh position for an E in the staff?
Oh, yeah.
Those sorts of things. At some level, logistically, we get into these situations where we kind of need to make it work.
Right.
And there are physics concerns. You can only move your arms so fast, and I think that that's kind of important. So that's everybody's got their own set of guidelines, and I think that with both of us having a lot of kind of jazz experience, we're playing with saxophone players who are playing things that we almost can't play, but if we might be able to play them if we use some alternate slide positions.
And like maybe there's some tone things that can be more easily forgiven when you're in the jazz realm of things, because you're doubling a lot of other instruments and blending timbres anyways, and some of the minutia of your sound might get lost in the weeds anyways in the speed of the line.
Thinking about playing like a melody that you're playing in unison with someone or something like that. That's a perfect example where, maybe this one note doesn't sound quite as good as the rest, but you'll probably be able to let that slide. So yeah, it's just different situations call for different things, and at some level, what I try to teach with a lot of my students is you need to know these alternate slide positions, because there might be a situation where that's the only way you can survive.
Yep.
I'm not worried that one day you'll struggle to play B flat in first position.
Right, like you're not going to lose it. Like you will probably play plenty of B flats in your life where it's not going to matter all that much if you start making a habit of using, fifth position or whatever.
Right, but if you never know where fifth position B flat is, and then you need it for something, you're going to be out of tune, or your tone's going to be bad, or probably both.
Probably both. I've played a lot of barky B flats in my life in fifth position. I will say that the majority of, like, I would say if there was like if we put them all on like a graph of like high frequency of like where we plotted a line, it would probably trend down. I'm trying to do this backwards on the Zoom camera. Of like undergrad, I probably chipped a whole lot more fifth position B flats, and then through trial and error, it has probably slowed down. Maybe it's trending back up. I don't know, who knows, but
yeah. But
all
I
that
think
to say, just make a habit of it, and just, you know.
Right. And did you ever forget where first position B flat is?
Many times.
Oh, yeah.
No, I never did.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, I think that's kind of an important way to think about it, is that you need to spend some time, you know, doing it and making sure that you can do it for when you need to, because it does come up occasionally that it's important. You know, and it's not just jazz music or something like that. You know, a perfect example of something that comes up is, you know, playing your low B flat with the trigger at the end of the first movement of the Grandal. That's a prime example of, you can do it other ways. In my experience, it doesn't sound better the other ways.
I haven't found a single way to play that lick correctly. Like even with a trigger, like, it's not perfectly easy. Bad. That's the white whale for me, to quote Moby Dick. I just can't. I'll get it. Scooby-Doo, flute. Right. That little situation.
But I think the trigger B flat helps.
Yeah, that's definitely. I have a way better shot of it happening. Even then, it's like a 1 in X amount of times. It's like, you know, we're gonna roll the dice. I know that it definitely felt like chance time. Like the one time that I played the Grandal for a jury, it was just like, wow, wonder how this is gonna go. Like, sometimes it goes great in the practice room. I bet with all the extra variables added to like actual performing in a jury, maybe it'll go great. It didn't, but they were willing to forgive me for that.
Yeah,
I guess the rest of it was okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's one of those things where we all kind of have to figure that out. I think, you know, going into the bass trombone land, I think one thing that's maybe important to mention is, you know, the differences of, you know, different bass trombones, whether it's independent or dependent and things like that. And you know, I'm definitely the type of person who likes playing an independent bass trombone. I believe at one point in the future I will own a dependent bass trombone, but that is not today. You actually see it behind me, other side, this side. There it is, in the darkness. But it's there, and you can see that those valves are stacked on top of each other, and they are independent. So for me, you know, one of the things right now I have two bass trombone students. One plays independent, one plays dependent. Both just like kind of happenstance. I don't think either of them really chose it. But I've thought with the one who plays dependent, I've thought about disconnecting his F attachment trigger, or taking the tuning slide out. It's one of my like mean teacher things to do sometimes. With independent bass trombone players, because I think it's so important to learn how to use the second valve. Connor's had to listen to me talk about how much I love the second valve recently. I think that's all off stream, right? We didn't talk about that on stream, or did we?
I don't think so, but it all blurs together. So
yeah, that might be a segue to that in a second. But with my bass trombone students who play independent horns, I like to force them to use the second trigger for a while, just to get used to it and know exactly where it is. Because I think that it's so easy to just only use the first trigger, because it's just like that's the progression, right? It's like you go from 0 triggers or 0 valves to 1 valve to 2 valves, and you never use that second one on its own.
Right. It is the second valve. It is in addition to the first valve. It's like, all right, I've pressed this one, now I've ascended, I can engage the next one.
Right, which, you know, if it's dependent, that's it. That's how it works.
Right.
But if it's independent, we don't have to play it that way. It may make more sense to use a different valve. Connor's heard me talk about this at length, because I have my new dream of getting a large tenor trombone with a single valve, but the traditionally, you know, second valve. So having it where there's only a G flat attachment instead of an F attachment, because there's just so many interesting situations that I think it can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Dave Taylor is an independent bass trombone player, I think. I didn't really realize that there was a Dave Taylor Getzen model. Is that a current model? I'm curious. Because I don't think I've ever heard of that. But I can't possibly have heard of everything.
Straight.
Oh, let's see. It looks like the 1062 FD. Huh. Yeah, I think I've seen this horn. I think maybe this is what one of my students plays on. He definitely plays on a Getzen that looks very similar to this. I don't know if there's any special sauce to that one. But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that existed. But yeah, so, you know, for that large tenor with just the second valve, there are just all these situations where I think it would be just easier to use than the traditional F attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing about it is you could always get a second slide made and have it be an F attachment.
Right.
Because it's easier to go longer than it is to go shorter.
Aha.
But yeah, I'm sure if I ever get that instrument made or get that valve section made, I'm sure it will make an appearance on this channel. I can't guarantee that it's super soon. It's definitely a pet project that probably doesn't need to happen. But
it could.
But it probably will. I don't think it would be that involved to make, because it's like they kind of already do all of those things.
Right.
Like they were just, I think the only, I don't even know if there would be any new parts. It would just be kind of cutting down, because theoretically you could just take a normal trombone and cut the valve down. But one thing I definitely feel like I want is having it be operated the same way as the second valve, which I think in that way it would be the only thing that would have to really change is the mechanism for it, which you might be able to use a bass trombone mechanism, but potentially not, because it'd be in a slightly different place. Mm-hmm. It could definitely be done though.
Right.
But we all have our dreams. I've been seeing that you've been using the valve section on the Edwards bell. How's that been working out?
It's been working quite well. As they used to say in the olden days, it is a friction fit, which is not like my super duper favorite thing to do in the world to a trombone, but I mean, we're being reasonably delicate with it and trying it out. It doesn't seem to be making the intonation particularly wonky. Or at least it's to say it's not making the intonation any stranger than it already was on playing a valve trombone, which is to say it's just kind of weird. But it's been cool. I'm hoping eventually there's like the part of the valve section where you press the buttons and that attaches to the bell just like a normal trombone, but those screws are not talking to the screw thingy on my Edwards bell. And so my dream is to get a tenon, the receiver in from Edwards, and cut off the one on the valve section and then just get the other one soldered on there or fixed on there. I guess they would is it just like a lead pipe where you can like just yank it out? I mean, of course I yank it. But does it come out like a lead pipe?
I don't think it comes out. I think it might have to be I think it might be a sawed off. Those are the sorts of things where they don't want to show you because they know that you'll just like,
I'll get scared.
Yeah.
But it's happening.
Yeah, those sorts of things can be scary to see.
Right. It's for science, and it would be fun, and also it's not like I'd be losing any critical resonance that's like inherently in the tubes inside of the valve section right now. So it's lived a full life, and there's already some stuff that's loose that needs to be resoldered anyways, and so
right. I have a question for you.
Yes.
How are you tuning your valves on the valve trombone?
How am I tuning them?
Yes.
Pretty much different every single time. And that gets more confusing when I put the Edwards bell section on it, because now I have two sections to like pull out and push in. And I don't like to move around the Edwards one too much, just because like it's in like its happy place for when I'm in slide world. And so what I've been doing is keeping that where it is, and then I'll push the regular tuning slide for the valve trombone, which is at the end, like at like the crook of where your bell would, or where it would be in your slide. So I push that all the way in, and then I've just been messing around with different combinations of things to try to figure out how to get things in tune. I haven't figured out or settled into like a particular setup that's perfect. Every time that I'm like playing something to get it in tune is usually like a project-based thing. Like it's kind of dependent on like the majority of the lines in the piece that I've written or something like that. And then I get that sounding good, and then I just lip everything around it. Tendencies that I've noticed is have to pull out the first valve to get 1 and 2 to be where I would like it to be, because that seems to ride high, and then some to the point that sometimes that makes just playing the first valve a little bit flat, because I can't adjust second valve because that tube is just so short. There's nothing to adjust there. And then eventually I've kind of come to the conclusion of just like there's certain things where I'll just like let the valve trombone sort of ride a little bit high, and things like really, really high B naturals like fourth line will become second position instead of 1 and 2, or like other various alternates and things like that. That's kind of been how I've been reconciling it. But that's been the main complaint. And then 2 and 3 is just weird. Sometimes it's flat, sometimes it's sharp. I think I just play it bad.
Yeah, I asked because at the end of the day, with no ability, because I assume those slides aren't moving while you're playing at all. Like there's no mechanism for that, correct?
No, there's nothing to like. There's no like kicking function or like on a flugelhorn or anything like that, which would be cool.
Because, you know, mathematically speaking, there's no way to play in tune without that.
Right. You wouldn't be able to get all around the horn.
No, because, you know, if your second valve is in tune, your first valve's in tune, when you do this, it's going to be sharp.
Yeah.
As you've discovered. And that's why, you know, you see trumpet players, you know, let's see if we can get that in frame, you know, they do a little of that. They kick out that action. Kick out that slide there, which you cannot do.
Not at the present moment, no.
Right. And then 2 and 3 is an interesting one because, so are you tuning your second valve to where that's in tune alone, I assume?
Yeah, because it seems to be like no adjustments can really be made, and so I usually try to get that like somewhere straight down the middle. And
then what do you tune the third valve to?
The third valve? I don't. I have no idea. Like just 3 by itself?
Well, I guess what note would you tune to put the third valve slide in the spot that you want it to be in?
That depends on the day. It depends on the piece that I'm working on. I mean, pretty much like it seems like third valve by itself runs low. Has that been your experience with things that are just straight down the middle?
I don't want to answer that question. I don't answer that question because I'm leading the witness to something else.
All right. So where do you want me to go? Ask the question again.
So what do you do to tune the third valve slide? What note do you tune?
Sometimes a G, like the fundamental of that one. I mean, not like pedal G, of course, but just like a G natural if I'm just doing just the third. But I'll be honest with you, I haven't done a whole lot of tuning just the third valve.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not being leading as much as I'd like. You don't necessarily have to use the third valve alone to tune the third valve.
What do you have to do?
Well, if you
like second and third?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how on a 4-valve instrument, which if anybody wants to know our feelings about 3 through 6 valve tubas, we talked about it at length last week. But for having 4 valves, which basically means my main third valve combination is going to be 2 and 3, because I don't use 1 and 3 mostly. You know, this is a generalization, but you know, you have 4th valve there and you have 2 and 4. So 2 and 3 by itself would be how I tune the third valve, and it's contingent on where the second valve is alone. But then I tune the third valve so that that's in tune. I think that's how most people end up tuning their third valve. Definitely when you have 4, that's the way to do it. But the problem with that, when you only have 3, is then everything else that uses the third valve, thinking about, your C1 and 3 and your B1, 2, and 3 are going to be sharp.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I mean, it's essentially an impossible puzzle with no answer.
Right.
But what kind of most of the time when I'm teaching 3-valve instruments, it's more often than not, it's going to be younger players playing in middle school. I realize you're not a middle school trombonist.
Some days.
Some days. But what I end up telling them to do most of the time, or I kind of generally help them, but maybe not talk about all the reasons why, is I tune the third valve so that it's in tune 1 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because in middle school band, not a whole lot of D flats.
It's a good point.
And the stuff you're playing, there might be some D flats.
There's a lot of them.
So
there's also a lot of low C's and B's.
Right, and
so what are we to do?
Right, there's almost nothing that can be done other than manipulating it for the line. But that's definitely something that I do mess around with, especially when playing orchestral excerpts on tuba. I have where I set my slides for that excerpt, which is kind of based off of the key, but also, more specifically the excerpt. Like Ride of the Valkyries, I kick my 4th valve slide out on my C tuba so that 2 and 4 is in tune. Because normally it's where 4 is in tune. But then 2 and 4 is sharp.
I see.
And, there aren't any 4th valve alone notes in that excerpt. There are no G's or D's. They're only, the notes that involve the 4th valve are low E, low F sharp, and low C sharp. Or low C sharp. I'm going back and forth between B flat and C fingerings and it's driving my brain a little crazy. But yeah, so that's something definitely to think about with a 3-valve instrument where you cannot manipulate slides, which is why I'm curious, do you have any thoughts about getting triggers or anything like that installed? No.
Probably not. The thing that's been great about the valve trombone has been how little I've invested in it and the return that I've gotten on it so far of creative stuff. I think that before I started buying any sort of aftermarket valve pushy-pulley kits for something the size of what I'm playing, I would probably upgrade to another horn entirely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's definitely not out of the question eventually, especially if I keep doing things with the valve trombones. It's a ton of fun.
You're using it, It's There is evidence on the internet.
It's true. It's technically something that has happened.
So yeah, it's just kind of an interesting idea, an interesting thought with those sorts of things of just figuring out what to do tuning wise. And then the other situation is, so you can't move your slides. Which way do you go? What's the best place to put things? And I would probably argue that the best place to put things is in their highest configuration as far as that, because it's always easier to lip down a pitch than it is to lip up a pitch.
Yep.
But then depending on the key, sometimes that may not make sense. But one thing too that might be relevant to your concerns of using the 3rd valve alone, this is what I didn't want to say earlier because I wanted to lead the witness, is there are situations where that 3rd valve might actually be in tune by itself. Just out of curiosity with that horn, how are the open notes as far as intonation goes? Like where is that F? Does it ride high?
A little bit, but not criminally, no.
Not criminally. Most of them aren't criminally high, but they are a little bit high. And so for that reason, a lot of times playing that D 3rd valve, but not the G 3rd valve, works out well. And then kind of with our human error in the low range being sometimes we're high, I would suspect that that's not a huge concern for you. But with some of my younger players, I often have them do 3rd valve for like low G because they're a little bit sharp down there, and that helps settle the pitch. But that's probably not happening to you if I had to guess.
Not a whole lot. I also don't write myself a whole lot of low Gs anyways.
Yeah. But that's kind of one of the things that I kind of use. And depending on the key, depending on the tuba, sometimes that works out really, really well. Other times, not so much. But the third valve, I think that one of the things that I don't like about how things are taught often with valves is that third valve alone is this like stigmatized thing of like you should never use it. It's like it's wrong, and it's just like it's right if it sounds good.
Yep.
If it's in tune and it has a good sound, it is good.
Then it is right.
So that's definitely something to kind of be thinking about, I think, with those sorts of concerns. But that's why, going back to when we were talking about the tuba valve number last week, you can see why more valves, more fun, right?
Right. I can understand now.
Because you're really missing that fourth valve that really would solidify a lot of these sorts of concerns. Because then you can have an in-tune D flat, an in-tune C, and just a maybe slightly out of tune B natural, slightly high, which again, how much are you playing B naturals? I know you are playing B naturals, or you can play B naturals, but
right,
you can avoid that. You can avoid that note.
Yeah, I'm not doing a whole lot of stuff, especially at least for the melodies that I've written so far. For the things we're presenting at Gen, it's all in the middle to upper register of the horn, just because it has a cool sound. Just because it's like the horn itself is quite small. It has this really cool sort of delicate sound, and then you match that with the valves and the flapping of that you don't normally hear with the tone of a trombone.
So for Gen, are you bringing both slide and valve sections?
Yeah. And so my goal right now, whether it be by friction or through screwing of things, is to have just the Edwards bell and then fly with slide and valve section.
Do you have a good way of doing that? Do you have a plan for that?
No, I don't have a plan for that yet, but I'm going to cross that bridge here pretty soon and figure something out.
Yeah, because you might end up with just 2 full cases to make it work.
Yeah, that might actually end up being the case if I have to fly, if I can't cram everything into like the ProTech or something like that, which I doubt I could now that I'm thinking about it more critically. It's not impossible.
Yeah, but also is it good for the instrument?
Probably not.
They do make bags for this very reason. Not that you could probably get it this quickly. But like Glenn Cronkite, they have bags that are, like 1 bell section and 2, like a valve trombone and a slide trombone section.
Huh.
So that might be something to, if this becomes a staple.
I know I've done it before. I was in Buffalo one time with both the valve and slide, and I know I didn't fly with a soft case.
Yeah.
I don't know how I did it.
They also have where you can just buy a slide attachment too, like because they have those travel cases.
Oh yeah, you can just buy a slide case.
Yeah. So they have a valve trombone bag with extra slide compartment. It could be yours for the low price of $506.
Yeah. We'll see about that.
Yeah.
Check with my accountant.
And you won't get it by the time you go to Gen. That's for sure.
Oh, well. It was worth looking.
Well, maybe we should call the show there. I know it's a shorter show, but, there weren't very many questions.
That's all right. I think we answered all questions about low brass today.
Yeah, there's nothing more. Everyone just needs to practice, and we'll all just, we'll all get it all together.
Yep.
Would you like to play us out? You certainly don't have to.
I don't have a horn with me at this exact moment.
Looks like you're not going to. Well, I
could play that little plastic piano.
Pass.
But you probably don't want to hear that. Yeah, you probably don't want to hear that.
But yeah, we'll call it there. We'll throw that outro video, which is the same as the intro video, and we'll call it a day. Well, thanks everyone for watching and chiming in, and we'll see everyone next week, maybe a little bit later in the day.
That's right.